Well, Jim Janis, it's great for you to let me talk with you today. I know you've spent a lot of time with sports.
I have.
Sports are really, yeah, really been important to you. And we're talking about fear. And I know that there is a lot of fear and courage involved in baseball. And baseball is your main sport. You played it, you coached it. So you're personally involved with how to overcome the fear that happens in baseball. So let me ask you a question. When you're a player and you're at the plate and that pitcher's throwing those fastballs, trying to get close to your head, try to brush you off, how do you deal with the fear?
Well, I think overall, Charlie, at that age, you've probably been hit by the ball numerous times. And you just have to realize, again, at an older stage, that as long as you're aware of it and you know that might happen, then the fear kind of goes away, if that makes sense, because you know that's going to come. It's still going to hurt, but it's still going to be, bearable.
When you were pitching, what what kind of fear did you face when you were pitching?
Myself, in the years I
Yes,
pitched,
yes.
well, the big, strong fourth batter that can hit the ball at 100 miles an hour back at you, that was pretty scary. Sometimes you got maybe hit in the shoulder or somewhere else, and you just know it might happen, but you concentrate on the game itself, and hopefully it doesn't happen.
So you concentrate on the game. So like the whole outcome, instead of just worrying about that moment of getting hit, you try to think of the whole big picture.
Oh yeah, definitely. You try to look at everything, what the signs are from the third base coach, what your friends are doing, not friends, well, friends, but also they're together playing baseball. And you're talking to each other about what you should be doing out there and that type of thing. But again, that's older kids, it's teenage and even college age kids that kind of know what's going to happen sooner or later. But the younger ones, sometimes that's worse because they maybe haven't experienced that. And they've seen other players get hit by the ball, and then they start to worry and they kind of, yeah, I'm a little afraid of getting hit. But again, once that happens, then you'll kind of know, okay, hey, it's not so bad. Depending again where the ball hits you.
So if you're coaching, a young kid, and you notice that, gosh, he keeps stepping away from the plate. He's really got a fear of that, of getting hit by that ball. And you've told us you look at the big picture, but were there any personal things you had to say to players to help them get over that fear? I got to stop you right now because my dog's making a lot of noise. So
Oh,
I got to get him out of the room.
okay.
Ford, Ford. Sorry about that. Postman drove up to the driveway. He goes crazy with
Oh,
postman.
yeah, we've
So
had that
I'll ask you
before.
that question again. So Jim, what did you do if you had a young kid who was really afraid of getting hit by that ball when it was pitched at him, and you saw him keep bailing out? What did you do to help him to be able to get past that?
Well, that's a good question because the safety kind of starts there when they're younger and taking certain measures so they don't. But okay, with even that age, make sure their helmets on, and that covers one of the places that you definitely don't want to get hit. And there's other wearing the cup. You don't know what that is. You want to make sure that they're not hit in the groin area or again anywhere. But those are two places you have to. Hey, this might happen, and whatever the name of that child is, you kind of tell them, oh, these are things that might happen, but it's not going to be so bad. I know I'm repeating myself, but they need to know that every year they start a new season.
So really, you're telling them the things that they're afraid of are not as bad as they imagine it in their mind.
Right. I don't know if there's a way you can teach that other than what I always try to do is, make that an important part of the game, safety. And that goes with, players of all age who throw their bat when they get mad, and helmets. I've seen that, and injuries because of that over the years. And also when you're practicing, in our case at the high school, there's a lot of there's cages where you're in there batting, but you have to make sure they're not next to each other, that they're spread out. They're not just fooling around. They have their helmets going. If they do that, some of the older guys can, it's not going to happen. We'll be okay. But you got to keep on that and make sure. So it's more of you're trying to just cut it off before something happens. And when it does, kind of be prepared.
I heard you say that you try to teach the kids that it's going to hurt, but it's not going to hurt as much as you think it is. Do you think that applies to life in general? That things that you're afraid of, that perhaps you fear it more than it actually is?
Oh, definitely. I think it is. I don't know. I don't like bees and wasps. And I run the other way when I see them. So maybe that's an exaggeration, but it does happen. And there are things, yes, I definitely believe that. There's certain things that really bother you and you're kind of afraid of them. So how do you overdo it as far as, playing safe and we should cancel that last part.
That's okay. So things outside of baseball, that you're afraid of. How do you take the lessons that you taught in baseball to help the batters overcome their fears? How do you apply that to your personal life?
That's a good question. Well, start by knowing that Jesus is behind you. So that's going to help and cause you to not be so worried about something. I really believe that helps. But it also, when you see other people, getting hit with the ball or something else that happens during the game, and then they see that, the next inning that fella's still playing. So that taught you right there that, okay, I'm watching somebody else get hurt. It wasn't so bad, so I'm going to be okay. And, I'm going to work with that. And with me over the years, in police work, I could add that you don't know what is going to be safe, what isn't, what you might run into. But you have to try to prepare yourself that, all is going to be good. It'll be taken care of, and there'll be somebody to help you or teach you.
That's great wisdom, Jim. That's great wisdom. Thanks
Mm.
a lot. I really appreciate that.
Well, no problem. That was good.
That was
I
great.
enjoyed myself.
Okay. Cris, I know a couple of years ago, you went through a really fearful event when you lost your sight in one eye and didn't know how things would be. And I know it's a very scary thing for any of us to have any of our major senses like sight taken away from us. And I'm just curious, how did you face that fear? How did you get through so it didn't dominate you?
Ah, well, I talk to God a lot, sometimes constantly. And I just felt lifted up by Jesus through it. And I had such wonderful support. Um, it's taken me a minute just to wind back into the time when I was fearful. I think I felt so guilty that was a big part of what led into the fear. I felt guilty that I hadn't realized I was getting a detached retina, and how stupid of me not to. I was always looking for a particular sign and I didn't get that one. It was other things. And I put it off when I did have a little odd stuff going on, because I didn't want to be foolish and bother the doctor with nothing, which happens sometimes. It had happened before when I'd be singing in church loudly and I would get these flashing lights, and I thought, oh no, that's the sign, but it wasn't. It was so I had the guilt, and that really exacerbated the fear. it made me feel full of doom. But when I started praying, it evaporated. It God just filled me with such hope. I think because I I have a prayer partner, so I spend that time every week. Sometimes it's usually 4 hours, not all in prayer, but lots of study and discussion and lots of prayer. And going to church regularly, I had that good foundation of being close to God. And so when the fear was undoing me, I could invite him in and I could really trust that that it, I could just let go. I could, like when people fall back into another person's arms, I couldn't see what was going to happen. But I even remember going to the surgery, and and people from church were texting me well wishes and that I was in their prayers. And I was reading that as we were traveling to the hospital. And I just remember the buildup of hope, of God's love, of feeling that no matter what happened, He was with me and it would be okay. Uh, I felt like I I was going to conquer it, whether I got my vision back or lost it in both eyes. I was going to succeed, and that is that's a big thing to say. But I can say it because God's proved Himself to be there for me, and all you have to do is just ask Him to be with you, and then pay attention. Uh, it, I don't know how else to describe it except that only God could do what He does. It's magnificent.
And so that's been a while. I imagine there are still times even now when something happens, maybe you hit your good eye, with your finger or something like that, and you become afraid, that you would lose your sight in the second eye. If that does happen today, how do you continue to not be in that fear, to be in that good place?
Well, that does happen, and sometimes I think about it a lot. Sometimes I even will just close my eyes and imagine, okay, could I find what I'm looking for? But I think it's that faith walk that we have with God, that we have to ask Him to increase our faith. That's something I've learned, that I can't depend on myself to do it. I need to remember that daily. And sometimes I forget, but I'm trying to remember to ask every day that God would increase my faith so that whatever comes, I'll know I can get through it with His help. It's a promise He made to us, and I believe in it.
Thank you, Cris. That's quite inspiring. Thanks for sharing your story with us. Yeah.
You're welcome.
There. So I'm recording. Jeff, it was so nice of you to let me talk with you. One thing I was wondering about was in your experiences in Vietnam. You shared with the kids some of your faith experiences there. And I'm thinking, not having been a soldier, that there had to have been times that were fearful.
Many.
And not having been a soldier and not having been in battle, I wonder, how do you not get consumed with fear? How did you find courage in those moments?
A lot of the courage, not necessarily courage, but we got exceptional training. So you were reacting to your training and doing set things. And just being somewhat around a group of very experienced people that you could rely on, that all had a common goal, just gave you strength in numbers. The Army had an incredible backup support. I mean, we could call and get artillery support within 2 or 3 minutes, mortar support probably within 15 or 20 airstrikes. We always had that feeling there's somebody right there. I think because of who you're interviewing me, I always felt a presence of God when I was over there. I never felt alone. I carried a Bible that was issued to me. I don't think I read from it, but we had regular church services and a lot of religious support. And I think that was really key to just feeling you're not abandoned.
So the church you went to when you were a little boy and a teenager, what you learned about God, that actually really brought you help and comfort when you were in war.
Yes.
How was it that you received that presence of God? There must have been campaigns or times when God seemed distant from you. You must have done something to bring him back. I'm just wondering, was it ever like that for you? Or was it, you were saying you just constantly felt his presence?
I think I constantly felt his presence. I think I've lost it. Sometimes I didn't feel God was with me, maybe when I was in my 20s because of the lifestyle I was living. But in the military, I just always had a very positive feeling that I was going to get through this. I had some periods where I was utterly petrified, but sometimes you compartmentalize where you don't think about what's going on. You think, what do you need to do, get through this? And then later on, you're going, how did I do this?
Wow. I think it's wonderful that you had that solid presence, that comfort of presence of God with you. Did you find yourself at times, Jeff, sharing that with some of the other men who didn't have that confidence that you had, that God was with them?
Not really. We weren't, I think you only sort of acknowledged religion when they were having church services and the amount of people that had their enthusiasm to. I had attended a church service probably 5 miles from the Cambodian border in the middle of a jungle, in the middle of a bomb crater, by a priest, Catholic priest who was a chaplain for our battalion. And it was, pretty well attended.
Sounds wild. It just sounds wild. So I'm learning from you, surprisingly, that when you're in this great challenge of war, that you had the blessing of God's presence with you, and that allowed you to have courage, and also the training that you had, and also the support of the people around you enabled you to have courage in fearful time. I'm kind of wondering if it was, you mentioned that it was in later years in your 20s that you were taken in that situation, that you didn't have that strong presence of God with you.
And that was, maybe I pushed my lifestyle to the extremes, like fast cars. I think I sometimes did more dangerous stuff in my 20s than I did when I was in the Army, because you got this feeling you were just invincible.
Yeah. That must have been quite a feeling for a young guy. Yeah, to have. So, since then in your life, your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, and all the different things we go through, and there are scary things that happen to us, and there's scary things that happen to your children, fearful things to your children that you love, and you don't have that control over them like you do over your own body in a time of conflict. How in those situations, Jeff, when you're fearful for your children, how did you find a courage or a trust that things would go well in those situations?
You hit on a good point that once you have children, your perspective on the danger they are in daily just changes. And I sort of have a philosophy as a Christian that dying isn't this bad thing. Dying will get you one-on-one with God and the Holy Spirit. The process of dying is what I fear. And it's the same for my children. I want them to have a life with Christ, a life with God, but I don't want them to suffer the pain and the anguish of day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to have blind trust. It's just faith that they'll get through it. I'm getting a phone call.
Yeah. So that looking ahead.
We'll have to edit.
Yeah. Oh wait, it's not.
My father-in-law went in for a biopsy. He may have lung cancer today.
Oh no.
So Wyatt's calling my wife, who's not here, to give her an update.
Oh gosh, I'm sorry, Jeff.
Uh,
So you look beyond the present to heaven, to meeting God and Christ. You said that you're not fearful of dying, but you're fearful of the process. Does having your eyes on that forward-looking goal, does that help you have courage in the normal things that we do with fear, that the illness, disease, not having enough money to sort out our last days, etc.?
yes. It puts it in a different perspective. On one hand, in the last year, I feel I've been incredibly blessed by God's presence in so many ways. And I've had to give up the social part of life is so frustrating. You want to be able to interact with people, touch people, but I think our Zoom church service has brought a lot of the sense of community back to that. Day-to-day fear sometimes is harder to deal with than an instant fear. That if you've ever been on an icy road and you lose traction for a few minutes, that's that instant fear.
So you're really good with the instant fear at the moment. It's just for you, as all of us, it's the slow grinding fears.
Yes.
That are harder to keep at bay. Yeah. Well, Jeff, it's really inspiring to listen to. I'm really glad I asked these questions to hear your answers.
It's making me think about them. I don't think I've ever thought about this in the depth of how I got to be where I am.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Hope that was helpful.
That was great.